There Was a Country by Chinua Achebe, Chapter 1, Part 8. A lucky generation. It has often been said that my generation was a very lucky one. And I agree. My luck was actually quite extraordinary, and it began quite early. The pace of change in Nigeria from the 1940s was incredible. I am not just talking about the rate of development with villages transforming into towns, or the coming of modern comforts such as electricity or running water or modes of transportation, but more of a sense that we were standing figuratively and literally at the dawn of the new era. My generation was summoned, as it were, to bear witness to two remarkable transitions. The first, the aforementioned impressive economic, social, and political transformation of Nigeria into a mid-rich country, at least by third world standards. But more profoundly, barely 2 decades later, we were thrust into the throes of perhaps Nigeria's greatest 20th century moment, our elevation from a colonized country to an independent nation. The march to independence. The general feeling in the air as independence approached was extraordinary, like the building anticipation of the relief of torrential rains after a season of scorching hot harmattan winds and bushfires. We were all looking forward to feeling the joy that India, the great jewel of the British Empire, must have felt in 1948, the joy that Ghana must have felt years later in 1957. We had no doubt where we were going. We were going to inherit freedom. That was all that mattered. The possibilities for us were endless. At least so it seemed at the time. Nigeria was enveloped by a certain assurance of an unbridled destiny, of an overwhelming excitement about life's promise, unburdened by any knowledge of Providence's intended destination. Ghana was a particularly relevant example for us subjects in the remaining colonies and dominions of the British Empire. There was a growing confidence, not just a feeling, that we would do just as well parting ways with Her Majesty's Empire. If Ghana seemed more effective, as some of our people like to say, perhaps it was because she was smaller in size and neat, and if it was tied together more delicately by well-groomed expert hands. So we had in 1957 an extraordinary event. I remember it vividly. It was not a Nigerian event. Ghana is 300 or more miles away from us, but we saw her success as ours as well. I remember celebrating with Ghanaian and Nigerian friends in Lagos all night on the eve of Ghana's independence from Britain, ecstatic for our fellow Africans, only to wake up the next morning to find that we were still in Nigeria. Ghana had made it, leaving us all behind. But our day came, finally, 3 years after hers. Now let it be said, there was a subtle competition between the two countries. There was a sense in which one could say that Ghana and Nigeria resented each other and competed for supremacy in every sphere: politics, academia, sports, you name it. It is possible that Nigerians were less accurate in thinking of our rival neighbor as being perhaps too small to matter. Of course, Ghanaians came right back by saying that Nigeria is bigger than Ghana in the way in which 3 pence was bigger than 6 pence. If one were to look at the various denominations of coins in those days, one would discover that 3 pence was very huge, much larger than 6 pence, and the quality of metal used in making the smaller denomination was clearly of inferior value and had less purchasing power in the marketplace, where it mattered most. So the relationship between Ghana and Nigeria has always been very important. Ghanaian nationals were heavily influenced by their Nigerian counterparts. The father of African independence was Nnamdi Azikiwe. There is no question at all about that. Azikiwe, fondly referred to by his admirers as Zik, was the preeminent political figure of my youth and a man who was endowed with a political Pan-Africanist vision. He had help, no doubt, from several eminent sons and daughters of the soil. When Azikiwe came back from his university studies in the United States of America in 1934 or thereabout, he did not return to Onitsha, his hometown. He settled at first in Accra, in the Gold Coast, present-day Ghana, where he worked as the editor of the African Morning Post, a new daily newspaper. There were stories of inter-ethnic friction in the Gold Coast, so he moved to Lagos. Despite initial problems in Ghana, Azikiwe had acquired admirers, especially young aspiring freedom fighters, including Kwame Nkrumah, the greatest of them all. Nkrumah was still a student in Ghana, but he was motivated to go to America to study largely as a result of Azikiwe's influence. Zik opened the historical black college in the United States that he attended, Lincoln University, to other West Africans and Nigerians. Quite a number of young Africans who left the country for America did so because of Azikiwe. It didn't hurt that Azikiwe wrote glowingly about America in his newspaper articles on almost a daily basis. America, you see, seemed to a number of those young people to provide an escape from the chains of colonialism. Soon after Azikiwe arrived in Lagos, he established his own paper, the West African Pilot. At this time, there were 2 or 3 families of newspapers, Azikiwe's, and an even older group from Freetown, Sierra Leone, the Accra Herald from the Gold Coast, the Anglo-African, Iwe Iharin, a prominent Yoruba newspaper in Lagos, and Herbert Macaulay's The Daily News. These newspapers had different traditions. There used to be a joke about the quality of newspapers that were founded by aristocratic Lagosians. Some of these papers went out of their way to be highbrow. It was said that occasionally large chunks of the editorials of some were written in Latin. In contrast to his competition, Azikiwe's paper was written in accessible, stripped-down English, the type of prose educated members of the society often sneaked at. And that was Azikiwe's intention, to speak directly to the masses. His strategy was an incredible success. The West African Pilot's anti-colonial message was spread very quickly, widely, and effectively. From the time of its establishment through the 1940s and 1950s, the West African Pilot was the most influential publication of its type throughout British West Africa, from Sierra Leone through Ghana to Nigeria. Azikiwe wanted to remain financially autonomous from the British, so he established the African Continental Bank in 1944 and invited wealthy and influential Nigerians such as Sir Louis Odumegwu Ojukwu to join the board. Azikiwe also started newspaper outposts in Lagos, Ibadan, Kano, Port Harcourt, and the market town of Onitsha. I remember in particular that traders in Onitsha and other markets throughout Nigeria relished the West African Pilot's daily political analyses and editorials. Many learned to read with the help of the pilot. The traders, in their eagerness to read Azikiwe's paper, often ignored early morning customers who visited their stores. The West African Pilot served other purposes. It became the nurturing ground for top journalistic and future political talent. Anthony Enahoro, who became the paper's editor, and Akintola Lasekon, the legendary political cartoonist, are just 2 examples that come to mind. The West African Pilot enjoyed an exponential level of commercial as well as critical sources after it supported striking Nigerian workers against the British government in the 1940s. Its circulation was in the tens of thousands. That was an outstanding achievement for its time.